environment, about renewable energy. So thank you very much for coming. We need to build this grassroots organisation, the passion for solar, just to show people how good it really is. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on here, the elders past and present, and for the elders from other groups that are in here today. First is some housekeeping. If anybody needs any loos and stuff, they're just over there. I'd also like to thank Bruce Sligo and the Anglican Church for the use of their hall. It's great that you guys are able to help us and support us. That is great. This has been organised here today by Tweed Climate Action Now. Just a local group of very dedicated, very energetic people. Should any of you like to join our group, there are some membership forms. Please do. We are a grassroots organisation that is always looking for donations and help. And we meet at the Imperial Hotel upstairs usually at 6:30 on the second Thursday of the month. Should anybody like to come and get involved. We'd like to thank Andy Yeoman for making this wonderful model. Andy's from...
Not just me, many others.
And others, yeah. And that goes with all of this. There's many people here helping. Beyond Zero Emissions, they're an organisation pushing big solar packs, which really is one of the keys to getting baseload power. Baseload power 24 hours a day. It can be all done with free energy from the sun. I'd like to thank some of our politicians. We've got Justine Elliott, Michael Armstrong next door from council here, so that's great to see, you know, that the political establishment is starting to take renewable energy seriously. Well, we have to take it seriously. If we don't, we're going to give our children a planet that is 6 degrees warmer. We're on that trajectory right now, and with that, they won't have a future. So this is probably the most serious thing any of us will be doing in our life, is stopping greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. We have speakers today. We have Sid Welling. Where's Sid? Oh, there he is. Sid's from Sunbeam Solar. Sid's a PV or photovoltaic installer, electrician. He does great work there. We've got Paul Taylor, the author of Biochar Revolution. Paul's right into all things renewable, including biochar and doing good things for the planet. Paul's one of the founding members of Tweed Can. Paul's been around a long time with Tweed Can helping us out. And Justine Elliott, our federal member, will also say a few words as well. After that, now to get it right, have we taken the photos that we were going to take? So after the three speakers, if you could hold your questions, at the end of the different speakers, we'll have a question and answer. So, yeah, just a couple of, just to remind you, we're a grassroots organisation, Tweed Can, and if you can help us any way you can, that would be great. Donations for the food would also be appreciated. Oh, on the food front, Loads Butcher and Murwillumbah Street Bakery have also helped with supplying the food at cost. So anyway, from there I'll ask Sid to come, and thank you all for coming.
I've been installing solar locally for 15 years now. Probably see a lot of familiar faces in here that I've worked at your homes and stuff. Firstly, I'd like to thank Eddie for opening up. I've never spoken to Tweed Climate Action before, so this is the first for me also. We did the solar system here at the Anglican church, which is a very lovely organisation to be involved with, and it was a spiritual experience as well as a good experience for solar locally. I suppose one of the things it's, everyone in this room, and in a way we're preaching to the converted, because everyone in this room is aware that climate change is actually real, and just like the weather that we've been experiencing just in the last few weeks is an indication of what we might expect in the future, and why what we're about is important. And even the onflow of that, and what happened in Newcastle last night with the historic pubs burning to the ground from an electrical fire. So these are onflows of different things that can occur even from climate change, and flooding in town here, and so forth. So there's lots of effects, and just looking at the devastation driving into town on the road, I'm sure it's the same coming in from all the little satellite villages into Murwillumbah. There's just, devastation pretty well everywhere where we look, so the climate is changing. I suppose I want to just give you a bit of a brief history about how we've come to this point and how I've come to this point. I started my career as an electrician in the coal mining industry, so I worked in coal mines for 10 years and specialised in electric drive trucks. And I left there mainly because I just couldn't bear working there anymore. I needed to come into the light, and came and worked for Country Energy for a few years before I started my solar business. And back when I started the solar business, everyone thought I was mad. Well, why would you go into that? There's no money in it. It's a pipe dream. It'll never be a reality, and so forth. And I've just watched this whole industry grow from a complete cottage industry of amateurs into a professional industry that it is now, and millions of rooftop solars now installed in Australia. And it's a massive success story. But like with any success story, there are pitfalls, and there have been issues that we have to be aware of, and we need to be focused on where we're going with solar into the future. One of the key outcomes, if you like, of the government policies over the years, or one of the rebate policies, was to push down pricing of solar. And in that end, the policies have been successful, but they haven't necessarily been successful because of the rebate. They've been successful generally because a lot of global conditions have changed. The global uptake of solar has increased, and also countries like China just upped the manufacturing ante, and that reduced the cost of solar, but also created a lot of poor product that's out there. So what happened was Australia was flooded with Chinese product. Now some of the Chinese product is of excellent quality, like world standard, as good as anything coming out of Germany or Japan. Some of the Chinese product is terrible quality, and unfortunately Australian taxpayers have paid rebates and so forth to have this terrible quality componentry stuck on roofs. And we see this every day because we're going around and servicing not only our own systems, but systems done by other companies that have come in through the area. So in the solar boom, if you like, there were companies that were coming from Sydney and Melbourne and all over the place and installing here in the Tweed. They've all gone now, but we're still picking up the pieces of some of those poor decisions, if you like. So these are some of the sort of hangover issues that you get when you have a boom like that, and you get and the insulation rebate was a classic example. There's a sudden influx into the market. Every man and his dog suddenly wants to be a solar installer. They didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't really appreciate quality and so forth. They were in it. It's a flash in the pan market, and now they're gone again. So it's one of the issues that we're left with. One of the other issues that we're left with in the industry, if you like, is a philosophical issue, and that is to do with the rebate. Because what we get a lot of the time, and I'm sure anyone here has tried to sell solar, is how much rebate do I get? Is it one of the first questions? And it's really sort of disappointing that philosophically that has changed in the mind of the consumer, because what we really should be discussing is power output, kilowatts, the quality, warranties, and those issues, rather than the rebate. So the rebate's really been a bit of a side salad distraction, and I myself personally have called for the rebate to be axed now for the last 3 years. I think that the rebate is something that no longer actually has a purpose in the industry, because the prices have come down to the point where, I remember when we were installing 1.5 kilowatt solar systems, and they were $20,000, and people were buying them. Now, a 1.5 kilowatt solar system, you can see them advertised for like $1,900. The thing is, though, this $1,900 solar system is probably of pretty dubious quality. So we're caught with this argument of quality and of the philosophy of the rebate. So it's a difficult sell to get that out there. The other thing that I've noticed, and again, watching this over a 15-year period, is the education component of what's going on. Because the customers that were ringing us 5 or 10 years ago were very well informed, and I'm sure that most of the people in this room are very well informed about the technology, because it was always a dream of theirs. So it was something that, I want to get solar for my house. So they researched it, and they understood the product, the pros and cons, the difference between poly and mono, crystalline and inverter types and so forth. Now that solar's moved into the mainstream, we're not getting asked those questions anymore. It's really difficult, because it's really, for us, for myself, I feel like the education component that we can offer the customer is a really valuable part of the whole experience. And there seems to be a real disconnect or disinterest in the learning about the new way of where we're going to be getting our energy. And these are issues that we need to address if we're going to go forward, because people need to understand the technology in order to embrace it in a greater level. One of the things that happened too was, traditionally, and all over Australia, there were little installers like myself, Kingaroy, Mudgee, Kempsey. There were little solar installers that have been around forever, and a lot of customers came back to those guys, and the traditional businesses were built on that sort of platform. What happened also is that we started getting retailers came into the sector, so they'd start ringing up, doing the big phone push, and you would have had letter drops and people knocking on your door and all sorts of stuff. And the retailers have created a lot of new problems for us as well, because they're not interested in the education component whatsoever. They're interested in making a sale, and then it's up to, then usually that's subcontracted out to an installer who really has no relationship with the customer. And the Clean Energy Council just only last week identified this as a major problem, because there is a disconnect happening between the retailer, the installer and the customer. So what used to be all in one compartment now has been broken down to a chain of different people. I know I don't have much time, so I've got to try and get through this as quickly as possible. So issues that we've also been seeing are installation quality, and a lot of that has to do with that relationship issues that we are seeing developing in the solar market. And installation quality will lead to poor outcomes like product failure or potentially house fires or so forth. Because solar can cause a house fire. Let's not be ridiculous about it. There is power generated through cables and so forth, and when the sun is out, you can't turn the solar panel on. It's producing energy as long as it's exposed to light, hence photovoltaic. That's the word. It's a description in itself. So what we've seen, I suppose, for us in our business is that because the cost of solar systems have gone down, that the margins have reduced as well. So the cost of running our business, providing qualified electricians, insurances, workers' compensation, all those things have all gone up, but the actual cost of our product's gone down, and the margins have gotten less and less and less. So a lot of traditional solar businesses are finding a lot more difficult to actually survive in the current market, because the margins aren't there. The cost has come down to a point where, you know, the cost of running that business isn't covered by the amount of sales that we're making. So, so even though the wish list has sort of been accomplished in terms of the outcome of reducing prices, it's created a whole new basket of problems that we're going to have to deal with going forward. So, globally, module prices have been going up. So if you check the module prices in Germany, for instance, or in England or anywhere else, in America, prices have gone up. In America, the prices have gone up because they put an import ban on solar modules, because they're trying to establish their own industry in America, and they've created this import embargo. In Australia, we don't have such a thing, and companies like Australian companies that were here, like BP Solar, Silex and so forth, all have gone to the wall because there are no protection mechanisms in the Australian market, and consequently we are just being flooded with Chinese product, which has led to basically the demise of most of the Australian solar companies. Some solar companies have managed to differentiate themselves by coming up with new innovative technologies, like Electronic, for example. So where they've been able to differentiate themselves by offering an innovative new product, other companies who weren't able to get themselves there, have fallen by the wayside. And this is a real problem for us in Australia, because we're not really reaping a lot of the benefits here internally in our own economy from the boom that has been, and we are probably going to see happen again, because the new boom is going to not be driven by feed-in tariffs and so forth, but by the rising cost of electricity. And what we're seeing this now, and just talking to my friend over here from SAE, and we're seeing it ourselves also, that commercial scale adoption of solar technology now is a reality, and 10 years ago it was just not even in the field, because the costs were just so high, and the offset to electricity bill just wasn't worth it. But places like pubs, clubs, all those places with high running costs of refrigeration, they might have a bistro or something there, some cooking facilities, they're really feeling the pinch with the higher electricity prices, and they're the ones that are looking to invest into solar going forward. So we're seeing the market breaking up a little bit too. We're seeing the market breaking up into your little 1.5 kilowatt systems for the residential user, and then your 3 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt systems for people that have swimming pools and air conditioners and so forth. And then we've got your commercial market, which is anywhere from 10 up to 50 kilowatts. So I suppose the positives, and I don't want to dwell on all the negatives too much, but the positives are that the commercial market is taking off, and really we only have to drive around the Tweed or Lismore or anywhere you go now in Australia, and you'll see photovoltaics on roofs all over the shop. And this is a transformation that's happened in the last 5 years, and it's indicative of not of government policy, but it's indicative of people policy, of people actually making the choice to do this with their own money. And they're that's the great thing about solar. And in a way, it's a bit of a badge of honour that your house wears, and so the people inside this house actually do care about the environment and are concerned about climate change, and we're prepared to make a statement to the fact. And I think that's a good thing about solar. My last point, I suppose I'm going to make, because I'm getting a wind up over here, is that one of the things that we need to achieve as an outcome is equity in tariff. And equity in tariff is very important, because we can't have a situation where dirty coal-fired power is valued at the same rate as clean, renewable energy that has been invested in by the community, by the mums and dads spending their actual money. People spending their money on their power bill, that goes back into dirty coal. And that money, those dirty coal-fired power stations, I know how dirty they are because I've worked in them. They were paid for by the taxpayer, right? And they're still being subsidised by the taxpayer. And this inequity can no longer go on. This inequity of the tariff of this, we have to see the value of renewables. We have to see that it has a premium price. So, yes, that's about it for me, I suppose. I've got other speakers who want to make a point. I don't know if I can answer questions at the moment. We're going to have a little question and answer at the end, so people can ask any questions they'd like at the end.
great. It's good to see that passion from the people in the industry, and there's other people in the industry here too. We'll bring them out in front that could have also shared wonderfully with you. And I'd just like to welcome again Justin Elliott being here, all of you coming out after the storm, and all the people, appreciate all the people that have helped put this together in inclement conditions. We're here, as was already stated, to celebrate the progress of solar in our community and in Australia. And I'm very glad to be here because I grew up in Sydney, but I spent 40 years in the US. I'm a physicist. I worked for the Department of Energy over there. And way back then, I had a vision that we in Australia and we in the world would be far better off if we turned towards the sun for our sustenance and our energy. There's 10,000 times more sunshine landing on the planet and in the form of energy than this human civilization uses. And it comes in all sorts of forms. There's about a kilowatt per square meter, so that 1.2 meter parabola out there will make about 1.4 kilowatts. That'll heat a kettle up just about as fast as in your kitchen. You can make big versions of that, like the Beyond Zero emissions people are demonstrating over there, to substitute for coal. It makes heat. It can make electricity just like coal can, but much, much cleaner. But I want to kind of remind us that solar energy is more than just technological solar. We've had a lot of rain lately. That rain got into the sky because of the sun. The earth is getting warmer, there's more rain up there, therefore more is going to come down. That rain comes down, and in the with the sunshine, it helps plants grow. They convert carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into sugars that makes biomass. We can take that biomass and use it to get energy. I'm the author of a book on biochar, and that's all about how we can use solar energy in the form of biochar made from biomass, get energy, and also help plants grow and so on. But the plants then transpire moisture back into the atmosphere, and guess what? That creates winds. We used to think winds were driven by hot and cold places, but now we're realizing that a lot of the winds are driven by plants, by forests. And wind is solar energy. Okay? The wind then drives waves, and that makes wave energy. All of that is solar energy. It's actually the only form of energy that won't heat the planet. Because every other form of energy, like burning coal, 70% of it goes up as heat. Only 30% comes along the wires, and that 70% would heat the planet even if we didn't have a greenhouse effect. And that's the future. But solar energy is coming here anyway. We can transform it, a portion of it, by all these different... By the way, when the sun lifts the water up into the sky and it comes down, a lot of it comes down in high places. And we can extract the energy from that water in those high places with hydropower. It's another form of solar energy. I just want to paint the bigger picture. I installed my solar system 3 years ago. I got a 10 kilowatt solar system. And of course, I didn't know where I was going to get the money from to build that system and the structure. And I was in the midst of writing this book, so I was really impressed. But when you commit to something, stuff happens. And some minor miracle occurred, and it all happened. I got the solar system. I'm very glad I did. It satisfies nearly all the need of our bed and breakfast. More than we use in the summertime, a little bit less in the wintertime. It's made 33,000 kilowatt hours in the 2.5 years it's been up, which has produced an income of $20,000 a week. And I got on a high feed-in tariff. But as Sid said, that's not really the most important part. And that feed-in tariff encouraged a lot of people to put their own money into solar. And that's what part of what leverage the industry. What people often don't realize is that, I actually got people were offered 67 cents for electricity, even more than the government mandated. That's because it was cheaper to buy that electricity at peak time than energy from peaking generators. So solar is actually bringing the price of electricity down because it reduces the need to build extra power plants to generate electricity at peak time when the sun is shining. So don't forget that. It's actually bringing the price down. In South Australia, where the tank oven has been twice the rest of the nation, they've the demand for energy has been reduced by 9% because of that solar on the rooftop. And that's closed 1.5 power plants now. In Germany, the price of electricity is now cheaper in the daytime than it used to have been even in the nighttime because the sun is shining in the daytime making electricity. By the way, this is happening big time overseas. Germany had a couple of sunny days last May where 50% of all its energy came from solar. It's trivial, not sunny all the time now. But, and also wind. There was a period in time in Germany in one region where 100% of the energy was supplied by wind. So there's a tremendous amount happening overseas in regard to solar. And China is the most aggressive country in the world in terms of renewable energy, and they're mandating that they want to. They'll be putting on as much solar in 2015 equal to half of all our production. So that's how fast they're moving. They're putting enough up to equal to about 20 large power plants. So we're in that situation. If we don't take this up, we're going to be let along by the nose by the rest of the world because they're doing it. But the story in Australia is really great too. How many people here have got solar on their roof? Wow. You know, the Richmond electorate has 24,300 solar systems on roofs, hot water and solar. And in Australia as a nation, there's 1.5 million systems out. So we've done pretty well. And actually, solar's been growing at a totally astonishing rate. It's been doubling every year for the last 5 years. Okay? That's the type of growth you get in computers and cell phones and things like that. Starting from a low base, but just like cell phones, they can get out into 80% of households or more. And that resulted in 2,200 megawatts of photovoltaics. That's equal to about 3 medium-sized coal plants. And we're just at the beginning. It's only 1% of Australia's energy sector. Ordinary Australians have queued up and invested $8 billion in solar. And, you know, it's not just the greenies that are doing it. It's people in the outer suburbs and the regional areas, as is being showcased here in Richmond, that are actually putting it up. They're not the top earners in the nation at all. 25% of them earn less than $65,000. So an outcome of that is that the industry employs 15,000 people across the nation. Again, it's just the beginning. Just think what could happen if this is not at 1%, but at 80%, how many people would be employed in Australia in the solar industry. So the message is that solar can help you control your energy bill. Energy is going to go up. It's inevitable because most energy being supplied in Australia requires fuel. And fuel is getting scarcer. And even though we're finding more different types of it, they're costing more and more to get out of the ground and delivered. And more people wanting it. So it is going to go up unless we find a way to produce our energy without fuel. And that's what solar power in all its forms represents. The interesting thing is because we can produce solar without fuel, it becomes much more like a phone plant. You know, when those phones, which were the size of bricks a long time ago, are now very powerful, very cheap, and you don't even have to pay for them. You just buy a plan. And that's what will happen when solar can be produced without fuel. Because then it's just the cost of the infrastructure. You know what that cost is going to be. You project in the future, and we can sell memberships. And one of the ways we can get that type of thing going is within our community. So it's not all been clear sailing as we've done this. The government's been a bit on and off in its policies and so on. And industry, of course, sees the writing on the wall. As solar starts to grow to where they see a threat, they start to fight tooth and nail against it. And they do that by spreading doubt and disinformation, or just half-baked stuff that's just not true if you look at it and you're not being impelled by your interest in the money that you might lose. And as we can see from many of the installers are driven not only by the desire of business, but the desire to do some good. So, and some of the things that the government's trying to do, and governments will try to do, or industry is trying to persuade government to do, is to increase service fees, put caps on the solar that are unnecessary. As I said, in Germany, they supply 50% of the solar on one day. They have no problem doing that. 100% of the wind. And things like that. So we really need to work against that. Today, by the way, there are dozens of groups across Australia doing the same things we're doing here. From Melbourne to Cairns, to Rockhampton to Perth. Out there, it's sort of the beginning of a citizens' movement to try to keep this momentum going forward. Keep this doubling every year type of rate on a global basis, 44% per year, continue. Australia is the sunniest place on the planet in terms of as a nation, as a continent. There's no reason for us not to push ahead. That was the vision I had as a teenager growing up in Sydney. And the group, 100% renewable energy, beyond zero emissions, and these other groups around the nation.
Paul, can you speak up just a touch?
I'm determined to work on our behalf to do that. Thanks. So look, I'll finish up. To keep all that moving forward, we need your help. And so I'm going to propose about 4 things that you could think about doing. One is, if you haven't got solar on your roof, think about putting it on. We've got people here you can talk with, or you can pick up the phone or the internet, and think about putting it on your roof. Second of all, just, be aware and learn what's going on, what's information, what's true information, what's disinformation. What's coming from the industry, it quite likely will be disinformation. They're not really very drawn to the idea of reducing the size of their business, even though it would be the best thing they could do. They're in the energy business. Why not go and produce the cheapest form of energy that the public is moving into and make the business prosperous? But they don't see it that way yet. Another thing you could do is go out and pick up some flyers. There's some flyers out there. Pick up 2 or 3 or whatever of them and take them and give them away to people that haven't got solar on the roof, or put them up on a notice board somewhere. And then just, get involved with people, as we already said. So, and by the way, another thing you can do is sign up on our list here. If you haven't signed up already, please sign up so that we can apprise you of events like this that are happening in the community. And the final thing would be, there's groups like TweedCan, which I belong to, 100% renewable and beyond zero emissions, that are working on our behalf to make this happen. So if you can donate to those groups, if you can't actually be active yourself, then support them with your donations. So I would like to now present the Honourable Justine Elliott with a certificate, which I hope I have here somewhere. As I said, this has the largest take-up in the Richmond district. It's actually 4th in the nation in terms of take-up, and that's a 17% penetration. So, Justine, I'd just like to really appreciate your support. Do we have any other councillor here, or? Michael, we've got a certificate for you. We'll have to get our secretary or something to sign it for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional landowners and pay my respects to elders past and present. Can I acknowledge our acting mayor, Michael Armstrong. Acknowledge everyone who's here today. Welcome to all of you. I'd like to acknowledge the fact that so many of you have come along today for a really important event. I'd like to particularly also thank and congratulate everyone with TweedCan and the great work that they do, especially Eddie over there and Yaka, who's hiding out the back down there. I know everyone involved with your group works just tirelessly in terms of raising awareness in terms of renewable energy, particularly big solar. And I'd like to thank you for representing our community so well. I know there are many groups that do this, but particularly TweedCan does an outstanding job. So thanks to all of you. Keep up that great work. It's very important for us in government to have that support behind us, and we're pushing to get political change to really make things happen. So we need to have that constant support from the community. So I thank and acknowledge the outstanding work you continue to do. Of course, today we're here especially acknowledging the fact that we've seen an increase in the uptake of solar power. I think that's great to see here on the North Coast and indeed right throughout the country. But particularly for here, it's wonderful to see such a high rate of uptake here in our area, and I'm sure that will only continue. I guess also from my perspective as well, again from the political perspective, I'm really proud to be part of a government that's invested in renewable energy, that's fought with the support of community groups to see action on climate change. And I think everyone here appreciates, to get to that point where we saw the legislative changes, that's because the community was so strong, was so outspoken, wanted a government that took the action, that put a price on carbon, that had that investment. And yes, it's a long political struggle. Political struggles are difficult to get really big reforms like this. And what a huge reform, a huge environmental reform, a huge economic reform that we as a community should be very proud of. And I guess from my perspective, it is really political. It's political in that we get political change, we're changing the laws, and we'll keep working every day until the next election, because there are a lot of people obviously that want to see carbon tax gone, that want to see all of the economic reforms gone. We know that's what Tony Abbott and what his Liberal Party and National parties want to do. So it is political for me in terms of fighting to make sure we see action, like action on climate change, stay in place for all of the reasons we know that it's there in terms of protecting the planet for future generations. We know how important it is. I know that everyone in this room knows how important it is, why that action was taken, and how we'll keep working together to get that. I also know, talking to many of you today and over the years as well, I hear loud and clear, you'll often say, yeah, we want low pay to do more. I understand that. We keep raising those issues, and we'll keep on doing that. Keep on working together and celebrating the achievements that we've got so far. I mean, how remarkable it is that we've actually taken that action as a government, as a community, to put a price on carbon. And yes, the world is acting, I agree, and it's great to see that. But we're also leading the world, and we should be really proud of that. And we can't afford to go backwards, and we can't afford to see exactly, I know that everyone in this room knows precisely what Tony Abbott will do. So I apologise for making that political, but for me it is, because come the night of September 14th, we're either going to see our journey continue for taking action on climate change, or it all taken away. But look, I'm here today primarily to thank all of you for the great work you do, and I'm sure we'll keep working together into the future as we keep moving towards the uptake of more renewable energy, and I really want to keep working with all of you to see what governments can do to make that happen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Justine for those words, and Dr. Paul Taylor as well. So thank you. And thank you all for coming along. Remember that we are solar. Every solar installation that we put up on a roof helps put a nail in the coffin of coal seam gas and a mega coal mine. Now, if you have a community, we need to stop that. We have to stop that. It's not only the effect on the communities, but it's the escaping gases from coal seam gas that's going to be driving our climate. So always keep that in mind. It's not mentioned very often, but it's the elephant in the room. So thank you all for coming. Sign that. Oh yeah, question and answer. Sorry, there's donation boxes up there, and if you can sign to join.
Eddie, I think this discussion needs to be broadened. I know renewable energy is one of the most important aspects of sustainability we're talking about. It needs to be broadened to include passive solar design. In the industry, renewable energy is just a part of active solar. Passive solar is about the retrofitting and designing, whether it's old buildings or new buildings, about the design of energy efficient systems. And to get beyond zero, you have to include the tweaking of built environment through either retrofitting of old inefficient buildings or design of new buildings that are more efficient. And there's systems now that are beyond zero. Net eco-positive design cities is now the cutting edge design. So the discussion on Beyond Zero needs to include a discussion on passive solar design as well as renewable energy. The two coupled together, if you add solar panels to an inefficient building, you're wasting most of that in terms of efficiency of heating and cooling systems, ventilation systems, the solar systems and the renewable energy, whether it's solar hot water, geothermal, hydro or any renewable energy needs to be coupled by retrofitting and making more efficient the built environment together with adding solar. The two need to be coupled together to get beyond zero. Because that's important. All of this discussion is a whole systems design approach, not just looking at renewable energy, even though that's one of the most important things we can do. 30% of the houses is hot water alone. Solar hot water is one of the low-hanging fruit parts of design. Just putting solar hot water on can knock out a third of your energy bill. So there's a whole lot of what we call low-hanging fruit. Tweaking, low-cost tweaking of built environment, whether it's a house or an office or whatever, you can actually halve your electricity bills for a few $1,000s, and it's proven even in commercial buildings, 5-year turnaround profit for up even beyond 100%, beyond reduction, you can go to a positive in a series of force basis. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to invite the other people. People from the industry have come in and taken a weekend day to come in. So I'd like to invite them out, and we're all here to answer a few questions. Jens, Sid, is Darren here? Anybody else from the industry?
Also, and can I also just, when Eddie, I just wanted to thank Ken, who cooked all the food. He's right over there. And,
at least I've got more. I've got to eat a little hamburger, so we won't be long, but we're here just to answer any questions that came out of that, or any questions you have about solar.
Before we break up, look, I first heard about Beyond Zeros and all that several years ago now. I've got an interesting background. I've got a degree in science. I did some finance stuff down the stock exchange in the 80s, looked at fund managers and how you finance coal companies, all that stuff. When you looked around at that, there was no big money on the table for big solar, like a project that, the big institutions, which they have to get, because it's those guys are talking about something like $34 billion to do the whole complete, what did Erwin just call it? Yeah, no, it's a holistic energy approach which includes big solar rather than just what they've done with Sid's industry, which he explained to us very, very well. Now, is that still the case? We've got a federal member here. That person really needs to go back and get outside the paradigm that they've got and look at, big money, big engineering things, and forget what we've done in the past in this country and look to the future. But there's no one actually taking the political courage to do that. Locally, we've got a deputy mayor here. The same thing that I'm disenchanted with is the local government. I noticed the supermarkets, everyone's putting solar panels on. The council still has to do it on a major building. The churches have done it, the other organisations, but the council's still dragging the things on that.
Look, the council has done it on quite a few major buildings, and we were involved in doing the Kingsley water treatment plant.
Yeah, well, I wasn't aware of
But
that.
to answer your question about big solar, that project's been on the table since the Howard government, and the money has been sitting there, and the Labor Party's tried to get it off the ground as well, and it's not the fact of them there's the impetus there to actually see that happen. The problem is the energy companies. When it went to tender to have the big solar projects installed, the energy companies, all AGL, True Energy, Origin, those guys, they tendered for the project. A company called Pacific Solar won the project, won the tender. What happened then is they've got the tender, we've won the project, yeehaw, we've got money coming from the government. They wanted to then get into a contractual situation with the retailers to sell that electricity that they were going to produce. The retailers are Origin, AGL, True Energy. They said, no, we don't want your energy. So consequently, the whole contract fell over. And they've had to go back to the drawing board. So what's going on is the big energy players are undermining the dream. And it's like, unless, like you say, the funding can come from somewhere else, or the government actually grows a backbone and stands up to big energy, we're not going to see that fundamental shift. And really, it is up to the government to lead it.
Yeah, following from that point, the other thing, all that's great. Yeah, thanks for that, because you know more about that side than I do. The other thing that's happened is we now know from what's in the press recently that the big mining companies, which call themselves energy companies, have done this backroom deal with the Labor Party. They've been able to redefine their assets so they can redepreciate them, and that's the reason financially given now why we've got so much from this super energy tax, or big super mining tax, that didn't happen. It's evaporated. The other thing is too, I think politically, Justine, you mentioned it was a political problem. You've got the odious thing of the Bead brothers doing backroom deals for their own personal families with coal minings. You know, the whole thing's falling apart. We've no longer got trust in the government to actually take leadership and do it, you know. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, why can't Australia, there's one word...
I hear you.
Sorry, there's one word that's never mentioned in Australia, and that is Norway. Norway back in the 60s, whenever it was, when North Sea oil and gas was started. Britain's done what Australia's done. It's basically sold it off.
Still can't hear you.
With nothing.
Open your mouth.
They're going to be left with nothing. Norway said to the companies, these are our terms, take it or leave it. And they didn't take it. For about 5 years they didn't take it. Then they came back and said, okay, we'll accept your terms. And now Norway is sitting on a huge interest fund. Norway is aware that its natural resources will not last forever. It's sitting on a huge interest fund, which is tied up so that the current government can only use 4% of the interest that it generates each year for current expenditure. The rest is in trust until such time as gas and oil run out. Then it can be used. Now, why can't Australia do that?
Fossil fuel industry, that's why. I mean, we
Well,
have
the government just isn't strong enough. They won't take a stand.
That's right. We use fossil fuel. The problem is all of ours. It's not. You can't point the finger anywhere. It's our problem.
Yeah.
If we don't get a handle on this, then we're not going to have a planet that supports civilization. I can guarantee. I'm a scientist. I can show you. That's pretty positive.
And it's like it is. You're right. It's a community problem. We all share this problem together. And you know, you could blame Labor or Liberal or Labor or whoever they want to call themselves this week. But the fact of the matter is that they are bound by the big energy companies too. And look, I know I've been a shop steward union delegate in the mines, and I fought hard for workers' rights and all that stuff. But they got the power, and like the whole idea of like voting and all that stuff. For me, I feel it's a bit of, sorry Justine, but I feel it's a bit of a misnomer, because the power base is with the people who've got the money, and the people who've got the money are Rio Tinto and BHP and Gasco and you know.
Well, then how did Norway get away with it?
Well, I suppose they haven't had entrenched mineral wealth and power associated with it. And really, if you want to go back through Australian history, you could take it all the way back to the Eureka Stockade, because really that's where the people power was taken away from them, and it was given to the people who have the minerals. And nothing's changed in 150 years. It was 1854, nothing's changed. And like, unfortunately, that's what. And I don't blame any side of politics for where we're at. I see some of them probably trying to be more ethical than the other side, but you know, we just got to vote green, I suppose. I don't know.
May I say something?
Oh, you want to say something?
Yes, please. My name is Jens. I'm from the SNE group in Tweed South. I have a German background, and I'm riding the solar coaster.
Slow down.
Sorry. I'm riding the solar coaster, not the roller coaster we call it, of the solar business, because it's always going up and down. So I'm used to that as well. We are in the hands of the politicians, of the leaders of the country, no matter what country it is. Depends on what decisions they make. But at the end, and that's what Paul is saying, we have to take it in our own hands. Everybody can do something, and everybody does a little something, but at the very end, it's the big picture that really counts. So I encourage people to reduce their electricity first, their usage, because that will already bring down 1 or 2 coal-fired plants. And then to reach the 100% renewables, it's actually quite easy. The leaders of a country, the parliament, and the people who vote these parliaments, they have to stand up and to tell them what they have to do for our own sake, and for the sake of the following generations.
Brian, the grey shirt, t-shirt.
We're not supposed to talk about tariffs, but what is the tariff at the feed-in tariff payment at the moment?
It's a net tariff. So essentially, if you're paying 33 cents a kilowatt hour for your electricity, you can expect to offset that during daylight hours at around 33 cents a kilowatt hour. If you produce an excess of electricity above that, you'll only get 8 cents a kilowatt hour for that, which is the wholesale price of electricity. And this is my point about equity. And we're not asking for equity on an industrial level, because we know that traditionally the Labor Party, if you like, or the Liberal Party are always going to go and fight for those coal mining, those 22,000 coal mining jobs, more so than they'll fight for the 15,000 solar industry jobs. And it's really that focus that we're hoping that change that we're expecting that was going to happen, that hasn't happened, where they would actually start fighting for the other side. And what we want to see is equity, because the value of an energy that if someone has paid out of their own pocket to put a solar system on the roof, like the Anglican church here, for example, you would expect that this clean energy that's been paid for, not by the taxpayer, that's been paid for by private enterprise, should attract a premium value when it enters the grid, and not a wholesale value.
There's one question in relation to that. Who's paying for that tariff? Is it the electricity company or the government?
The electricity company, if they choose to purchase the electricity from Tarong Energy and Kingaroy, for example, they pay 8 cents a kilowatt hour. If they choose to purchase the electricity from the Anglican church here in Murwillumbah, they pay 8 cents a kilowatt hour. They don't really care where the electricity comes from. They have peak demands and so forth that they have to meet, so they're just buying blocks or volumes of electricity. The point, I suppose, is that some electricity is more valuable than other electricity, and it's one way, and this can be a legislative change. It's one way that we can actually identify and stand up to big energy and say, no, big energy, you've had it all your own way. The taxpayers set up these power stations. We set up the infrastructure that you use every day, and now we want to value something at a higher price, and they're just going to have to wear it. But the problem is there's no backbone, and I don't want to blame either side. I can't really blame this government because they really haven't had the majority in a way, but then they haven't really made the noises to actually that we want to hear too, to say, hey, yeah, we want to have some backbone to stand up to these bastards.
Sid, can I ask a personal question?
Yes, please.
Well, my solar panels are 23 years old, and some of them aren't functioning efficiently. And the new technology panels, would it be best to replace, say, the 4 worst ones with the new technology, and will that marry up? Or would I just add the new another set of panels on to my 16 existing, not working very well?
If some of your panels are beyond that, 25 years is probably about 23. Yeah, 25 years, they're probably going to get close to the end of their life. If they're starting to fail, it's probably, look, the cost of technology is so good now, it's probably prudent to just ditch some of the old ones and get the new ones. If you choose the right ones. So in your situation, you need to have the appropriate voltage panel for your particular system. So yeah, different systems, because there's such a variety of modules out there now, it's just about making sure you choose the right module for this one.
And you also have to look at your inverter, your existing system. You have to look at, Sid has to look at your inverter as well.
Yeah.
So this is a standalone.
Oh, it's a standalone.
Okay.
Okay.
Reference earlier, large roof areas accommodating panels, such as churches, supermarket areas and that sort of thing. Imagine schools all the schools we have in the area, not just here, but everywhere there are schools, some are quite large, high schools, etc., big spaces, roof spaces, and they're not used 24 hours a day. There's a break on weekends and there's holidays, and what they're generating could be all feed in, it could be contributing considerably. And another, just a point on, as you mentioned, we all should try and do something. There's an old saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
That's what I'm saying, yes. And the schools actually, they had a program called the National Solar Schools Program. We have installed systems on the schools, I reckon as well. And the good thing is, the part of the program is that the kids had to be educated. So there was a display in the room on the computer. The kids learn about solar. So the government has done a good thing. They spent money, and the carbon tax is actually bringing this money in again for future projects. But it's already happening, and more than 1,000 schools have been installed by certain installers, and it is a very good program. And the multiplying effect, I think, is the most important, because the kids see it is working, and they tell their parents, "Hey, Mum and Dad, why don't you have solar?" Great.
Just as a point about the National Solar Schools Program, and I was involved in the first round of National Solar Schools that ever went in, and I've been involved in every round of National Solar Schools from there on. And Andy over here, who I've worked with on this program as well, knows that unfortunately the National Solar and Schools Program, which is a fabulous idea and it's a fantastic program, has also been undermined by politics again, because in New South Wales, and this is a fact, there was a deal done where all the National Solar Schools jobs were given to 2 companies. And companies like ourselves, who've been represented here locally for 15 years, were all left outside. We were like, "Oh no, you're not doing it, it's all going to Bovis Lend-Lease." Now, the problem, these deals were done down in Sydney. We didn't get a look in. Now the thing is Bovis Lend-Lease going to be doing any support over here? I very much doubt it. And like, if there's a problem, who are they going to call? Bovis Lend-Lease. Like, there's just not going to fly a guy up from Sydney to come and look at your problem. And our argument was that support, you need local support, and you need someone that can actually deal with the issue locally. And sorry, Andy.
Just one point on that. It came to the point where I was on the phone with the guy in charge of New South Wales schools on this program of dishing out the money, and he, as the last ditch on one of the schools I was working on with Sid, said, "Oh, but if your school goes with Lend-Lease, we back it 100%. Any insurance damage or damage that should be covered by insurance, okay. If you go with a local company, we can't do that. It doesn't become a school asset." That was their last threat. Then at the last minute, magically I think the guy got shifted aside, they backed down, and Sid got the job. But the whole thing was a battle.
It was a battle
through and through. They had mistress in tears with these it has to be so much bigger because it won't have the backing from the local guy, that the Lend-Lease just come running. Sorry, 2 words, B&S.
Yeah, and my understanding is that once you pay the invoice, it's your asset, So that's just, that sort of codswallop that they were feeding us locally here was just totally, well, it's just rubbish. And, the problem is the policy development isn't really, the policy development's being done somewhere in Sydney in some back office, and it's not really considering the input from the community. And like, is that a policy development, or is that just what is that? It's not a policy.
They hopefully learn from these mistakes.
In the article in the weekly that actually brought me to this meeting, they mentioned solar leasing, so lease panels. I did a little bit of research, and there seems to be a lot of problems with all of that they've experienced in the US. I'd like your opinion on solar leasing. Is this a good idea, or is it something that they've got to steer clear of?
I've seen the idea coming out now, and in the US it is happening. I know it is. And there was a company a couple of years ago tried locally to get that off the ground here too. I think it's sort of fraught with peril in a way. Maybe it can work, but it's it sort of gets away from the traditional transaction, if you like, of I want this thing, I go to the shop, I buy it, and I utilise it as my own. The thing that there are leasing issues, what happens if you suddenly get a high bill and the guy that you're leasing the system off hasn't come out and repaired it, and they're saying, oh, we're not going to come for 6 months, and you're going to be then paying the higher bill and paying the lease, or what goes on there. So there's a lot of grey areas still, I think, in that. There was another project too that was talked about where they were going to build a big solar plant, and then you could invest into owning pieces of that plant, and you would get some sort of return on that. But I don't know where that's at.
There are things in the pipeline. One thing is called power purchase agreement. Means the commercial customer and SIP and my company, we get approached by commercial customers who have high refrigeration, high lighting costs, and so on. So what we are looking at is that we own the system, we do install the system, so we know exactly it's actually working, and we know the quality that we are installing, so we know it's going to work. And the customer, basically, the owner of the building, the commercial enterprise, is basically saving on the electricity bill. So they pay us back what they save. So there's some certain systems, but they're not really off the ground. There are some legal issues as well. Who owns the system? Because usually when it's connected to the roof, it's part of the building. So
if you want to sell a house, you have to find someone to take over the lease.
Exactly. So there are some issues, but I think in general solar is unstoppable. The government did something called the Energy White Paper, and they are looking quite far ahead, actually to 2050 and 2030. So it's a good thing. Politicians have to look ahead, because not only one generation, it's more generations that are to come. Means they say, and the prognosis and estimates are usually quite conservative, they say 2030 solar is the cheapest form of generating electricity. And it's the cleanest as well. Great, let's do it. So they actually understood, but there's resistance in the industry. And that's the big coal miners, and it's the big electricity retailers. So again, it's about power and money. But as I said, we're unstoppable. Solar is not a question for me. If we use it, it's a question when we use it. When we use it in large scale.
Yeah, on your idea of reducing the electricity bill, I wanted to talk by Tim Flannery, and this idea should be spread.
Yeah.
You should negotiate with your children and your grandchildren, to your grandchildren. Ask your parents, what was my electricity bill last month or quarter? If we can reduce it, can we have the difference in money as kids? And you go around, kids go around, turning off all the how it's being used. Stand by. It's a great idea.
It is a great idea. I have problems with kids.
No, they're making money.
Yeah, no, they're getting money out. No, that's great. And it's the easiest way. It's the easiest